All right, welcome to the newest installment of the Fragments of Silicon reviews. 4 reviews up this week. The first of which is not exactly sure how this is pronounced. I'm going with Silmaris. Could be Silmaris. It's a made-up word name thing for a fantasy location. So until I hear a proper pronunciation from the developers, your guess is as good as mine. Anyway, Silmaris Dice Kingdom is a adventure / strategy game. Well, it's in the name, isn't it? Dice. That is the literal name of the game, as in everything is dice. Everything is dice. Reminds me a lot of, I believe the game's called Dragon Dice. I think that's a D&D thing. But don't quote me on it. I remember a game played entirely, like a tabletop sort of game played entirely with dice. That's basically what this is. Although it's less about the usual sort of tabletop dice. It's all six-sided dice, and all the representations here are cubes, but they're not six-sided dice necessarily. Or rather, there's a yes and a no function, basically. Maybe just split off into 3 even keels. But there's no 4-sided, there's no 8-sided, there's no 20s here. It's all your cube-sided dice. That isn't to say that there isn't a great variety. In fact, let's see. There's about 6 kinds of dice. There's your war dice, which is used for combat. There's your diplomacy dice, which is used for alliances and getting to an alliance. There's your cunning dice, basically your sneak dice that allows you to do espionage and spying and illicit trade, that kind of deal. There's your exploration dice, which is used for certain missions. I found they're about the least useful dice overall. And then you've got the crop dice. I think they referred to in-game, but it's your expansion dice for practical purposes. That is to say, your hometown has a list of expansions that allow you to get more of a color of dice, and you need to have a certain amount of yellow dice in order to expand it. This kind of dice is very useful in the later game because it's the dice that will allow you to exchange dice. I'll get into that a bit, for the least amount as the game goes on. Like I said, there's a lot of systems here. And finally, the last kind of dice are the, I forget what they're called in game, but they're your re-roll dice. Like if you have an encounter that goes bad for you, you can use one of these purple dice or 2, depending on how many dice you want to re-roll, and re-roll for a better favor, hopefully. So those are your basic kinds of dice assigned to your basic kinds of tactics, for lack of a better term. Yeah, I say tactics, but it's more choices. Like everything you do in this game has a dice value attached to it. Which is why this game is called Unforgiving. Because, and it's not a small amount of dice either. At least usually. There are ways to reduce dice rolls. That's a big reason why you want to do spying missions, is you'll be able to like temper down the amount of black dice or blue dice you will need to use in that area. And as far as how you get dice, there are two ways. There's the get dice. So you have a band of counselors helping you, and when you use this option, all of them will pop up. Or actually, no, there are three ways. Yeah, but this is the most basic way. So this is the way that doesn't involve the depletion of other dice, but there's a cost nonetheless. I'll get to that in a bit. Anyway, you go to the get dice. You put down a roll, and how that works is each counselor is proficient in a certain area. The base roll is 1. But if they have a proficiency in war, +1, you'll be able to get 2. And if you've got +4, you'll be able to get 5 of those. And your counselors will default to the most amount of dice that you are able to get. Though later on, you will get counselors or you will get relics that will allow for multiple fields. And depending on how the game goes and various configurations, you might want to manually select a different dice roll. That certainly happened to me when I had a bunch of counselors proficient in green dice, but one was proficient also in yellow dice, and they were my yellow dice gatherer, to cite one example. Other ways to get dice is to trade dice, which is where you go to a marketplace and you offer up a certain amount of dice for a certain other amount of dice. And at the beginning, it's all 3 dice for 3 dice. But as your I'm not exactly sure what triggered it. I think it's counselor proficiency. I certainly did notice that the dice amount got larger as the game went on. My best game, exchanging, say, for 3 or so black dice, it took 7 or 8 green dice, and except for the yellow dice. That's why those are another reason to keep them around, because they're a really good way to quick convert. Get into that in a bit. And the other way to get dice is through trade and and smuggling, depending on your relations with your neighbors. If you've got good relations, you can trade. If you've got, even if you have good relations, you can still smuggle stuff. And this will allow you to get X amount of dice for X amount of dice. Usually 3 dice for 1 dice, that kind of deal. But never just a straight up, you are given dice. Now, I suppose the only way to get that is by completing quests. So I guess there's 4 ways. And mind you, that's either a satisfactory completion of a quest, remaining in character at the beginning of the game. You will be given a discipline, say merciless, and if you act in character, regardless of consequence or sanity or anything like that, you will be given a dice in that direction, a purple dice at that, which are generally considered to be the most valuable. And through the quest system, some choices will require you to sacrifice dice based on, I've got to send soldiers over to this forest to deal with a ogre or something, and that's going to reduce your black dice force, which is a representation of your soldiers, and so on and so forth. and you're rewarded or penalized depending on how things play out in various capacities. You could lose blue dice, you could use black dice, you could lose purple dice, that kind of thing. You can gain in the other direction. It all depends on how things play out, and there's a lot of scenarios. And you will get a scenario a turn. The way it works is you go through the turn phase to gather your dice and do a thing, maybe multiple things on the rare occasion. It's like technically if you use a counselor, you only use that counselor. But, I'll be honest, more often than not, you're probably only going to be doing one thing per strategy round. And that's down to the dice totals, because in most things, implementing a dice roll is expensive. It's usually going to require your entire pool of that particular amount of colored dice. Now, there are instances where, okay, you might have a whole bunch of blue dice, a whole bunch of red dice, so you're able to do diplomacy with Kingdom X and to do a smuggling attempt with Kingdom Y. But once again, I found that to be the exception rather than the rule. And also, these dice totals do increase over time. Like, like in order to make a full-on treaty with someone in the later game, it was about 27 dice there. And it was, as well as to actually besiege a kingdom. That's like I said, these things go up the more you progress and do well, as you kind of expect from from a difficulty curve. Let's see. And also worth noting, in the strategy phase, as I'm going to call it, side missions will open up, and you can engage in them, and your reward is usually a relic of some kind, which will enhance the abilities of your counselors. It's one of the two ways to improve your counselors. The others is to literally hire better counselors. And you do that by going to a menu option, looking through the pool of counselors, and selecting what you want, provided you have the amount of purple dice needed to buy them. I think the highest I saw were 5, and also worth noting, depending on how the game plays, this dice price can increase or decrease, and you can have people from this pool desert you, and so on and so forth. And also, your active minister roster may be depleted due to some storyline reasons. And also we're noting that some of the storylines that will crop up during your playthrough, they may be one and done sometimes, but usually they are multi-turn affairs, though they might not be sequential turn affairs. A wyvern will show up, and you have to deal with that within the next 2 turns. But the after effects, the reverberations may not be felt for 3 turns or something like that. A good example of that is the cultist subplot, which ended up crushing me on my last playthrough, because there's a good chance they could take you over, or they can take over other kingdoms. It's I actually had half of the valley aligned with me and half the valley aligned against me. And dealing with 3 armies at once, this is kind of the limitation of the game. It is pretty easy to get into a scenario where you just don't have the fucking resources to deal with the occasion, and you will just be crushed. It's not an easy game, is what I'm saying. Anyway, let's see. So I think that's about the summation of things in terms of the mechanics.
Is there any way to it's like save scum or like have loaded dice?
No,
Ah,
it certainly not save scum. It's going to save every turn to literally prevent this. Like,
fair enough.
loaded dice is a thing that I'm surprised they didn't have.
Or even like
You know,
60-40 split dice instead of like 50-50 on some of them.
well, here's the thing.
You can't
if
do
you
60,
get
40, but you can do 60,
well,
33.
Well,
You know what I mean.
Here's the thing. Yeah, well, here's the thing. They do offer you a bit of leniency if you do get a 50-50 split, in the sense that you got 3 dice, your opponent got 3 dice. If you tie, you win. So, it's, believe me, it's a lot more mercy than you might think at first. But going through the game, you will come to appreciate this mechanic. But yeah. So, like, this is a very, very deep strategy game. There's a whole bunch of endings. Not surprisingly, a lot of them are your fucking doom. Like,
Shocker.
you got conquered. You got subsumed by the void. You got eaten by rats. Like, you got conquered. So, yeah, there's a lot of bad ends, and I didn't get any of the good ends because those are really hard to get. But I'm willing to bet there's a few ones of those. Like, your ultimate goal is to reunite the valley by any means necessary. Let's say, that is, you do that by diplomacy, chicanery, or through brute force. And I'm willing to bet that there's an ending tied to each methodology. Now, can't confirm it, but yeah. And as far as graphics go, you're not going to be looking at a whole lot. There's a lot of reading in this one, and not a lot in the sense of graphics. It's almost like a visual novel, if I'm being honest, in terms of its presentation, outside of the dice rolls, which are very nicely animated. Like, the music was really soft. Almost, it was all right, but I'll be honest, I muted it so I could have a deep think about things, because sometimes you will have a choice that you'll need to parse through, let's say. And yeah, so the game goes for $10. And do I think this game is worth $10? Is this a good game? Yes and yes, provided you are in the mindset to play something like this. That is to say, it is technically a strategy game, but do remember, this is all based off of dice. There's no experience points or anything like that. There's no levels in that sense. It's all dice. And I did mention that the dice amounts to be used do increase. It's also when you use dice, you use dice. Like, if you have a thing that takes 12 red dice, those 12 dice get used up. They don't go, if you succeed, a portion of them don't go back into your pool or anything like that. There's no, that's what makes this game really difficult. It's like win, lose, or draw, which is in this case a win. You will be expending a lot of resources to do things. And that's where, deciding what you want to put into and where you want to go is very key to winning this game. Also, sometimes, making sure you have that in a proper amount of time, which is another reason why this game is really fucking hard, because sometimes you just don't have enough time to gather up the amount of dice needed to stop the sacking army or something like that. So, and once again, since these are dice, even though the more dice you put in, the higher your chance, it's never going to be 100%. Closest it'll be is 99%, which, yes, is almost 100%, but it's not quite. So everything here is predicated on a bit of luck. And if you don't like that in your game, I will say seek elsewhere. But for what this is and what it sets to do, it's a very good game. But I can also see why why this game wasn't necessarily picked up by, say, RPG or strategy enthusiasts, because it doesn't play like one of those games. I really do think framing this, it's basically a visual novel with chance mechanics. Is the best way I can frame it. Right. So, any other questions, comments, or concerns over Silmaris here?
I think I'm good.
All right.
I also am satisfied.
Very good. All right, so that'll about do it for Dice Kingdom here. Be sure to tune in after the break, as Petty Fan will be reviewing Ashina the Red Witch.